Okay, I have to say a bunch of vowels to make sure that the microphone works. I once fell for a guy who only knew 4 vowels. Unfortunately, he didn't know I existed. Let's get started. So I'll be talking about moving to React at CodePen. Like he said, my name is Cassidy Williams. You can tweet me at Cassidy. I'm always looking for new friends. I do tell a lot of dad jokes, but I'm not a dad. I'm a faux pas. But yeah. So, just getting started. Got to keep the energy going at the end of the day. So anyway, I work at CodePen. Who here knows CodePen? Yay! Oh, I'm so glad. CodePen is such a fun place to work. For those who don't know, because there's probably a handful in there who don't want to be too loud about being that. Anyway, CodePen is an online code playground. It's a place where you can code and experiment and prototype cool things. It was founded in 2012. Our team is about 8 people. I shouldn't say about 8 people. It is 8 people. And we're a fully remote team. I'm based in Seattle, and we have people in Australia, in Texas, all over. It's great. And there's millions and millions of pens on the site. It's a great place to just experiment, to learn, and you can get a pro account, shameless plug, to have private pens and team accounts and so much more. So anyway, that is what CodePen is now and you know, forever, hopefully. But the origins of CodePen are interesting, and this is where I'll get into kind of the technology side of things. So CodePen was originally built in Rails and jQuery with a homegrown MVC, model view controller system in 2012. And at that time, it was very modern. It worked awesome, and you know, a lot of the site still runs on that today. And then in 2016, we mentioned the whole Redux coming into play in previous talks. React started coming into the picture with Redux, and CodePen Projects was launched, and the dashboard was launched, and a few other things were written with React and Redux, and that was how the team kind of got introduced to the React world and started moving away from Rails and jQuery. And then this past year, in mid-2018, we decided no more Redux. We're going to be moving to Apollo and GraphQL. And so all these powers combined, and you have chaos. So I'm going to show you just a bunch of pages of the site that you have probably seen before if you've ever been on the site, but you might not know what these pages are actually built with and what they consist of. So this is the home page. It has the picked pens on the front page. It's got that sidebar. It's got the user menu. And I'm going to show everything in red is going to be Rails and jQuery, and everything in blue is going to be in Apollo and GraphQL. Boom. So the sidebar is in Apollo and GraphQL. The user menu is in Apollo and GraphQL. And everything else is still Rails and jQuery. What's blue and doesn't weigh a lot? Light blue. Anyway, so let's move over to the dashboard. And now in this case, I mentioned that the dashboard was built with Redux. And so in Redux, I'll show things that are green, and then everything else will, again, be in their normal colors. Voila. And so the dashboard still has some elements of Apollo and GraphQL, which is, again, that main user menu in the sidebar. But the dashboard is still very much Redux land. And we've got the deleted items tab, which that one we just added recently, like last month, where if you delete a pen accidentally, you can get it back. And that was built all in the new stack, and we had to just kind of stick it in there amongst all of the Redux code. And it's not the cleanest thing in the world. Inside the tab is very clean. Sticking it in there, not so great. And then we also have the saved views menu randomly uses the new stack as well. This is Rachel Smith. She's an engineer at CodePen, and this is her profile. And profiles, I hate to say it, but they are still very much in Ruby land, except for the follow button. It works out. Yeah, so the follow button managed to squeeze itself in there. And so as a result, you might start to notice, because these are all kind of separate pages with all of these different React things, they're actually whole React applications in themselves, just living inside divs inside the Rails universe. And so like in this Rails page of the profile, we have a div that stores the entire sidebar, a div that stores the entire user menu, and then a tiny little div that stores the follow button. And as a result, all of those need to connect to like a global Apollo context, so that way they can still like be in sync with each other while also still living in this Rails universe. Super fun, right? Topics, this is actually, this is something that we launched relatively recently, and it's just pens and things about certain topics. And if you want to see more about Vue.js or React or just different design patterns and UI patterns, you can go in there and check out cool things. And this page was built all with the new stack. It's a great resource. I recommend bookmarking it. My husband asked me the other day, hey, can I have my bookmark? And I cried because he still doesn't know my name. Yeah. Get it? I'm not Mark, I'm Cassidy. Okay. Anyway, some people are like, oh, okay. Anyway, this page is mostly the new stack, Apollo and GraphQL, and then the search box is still, living in good old Rails land. We'll get it in there eventually. But the good news is it's kind of partially living in the new stack. If you click on the search box and you open up this little drawer that has all the different filters that you can throw into the search, that is actually built in the new stack. And so it ends up being a little bit more like this, which kind of looks like the previous slide. But still, we have some aspects of the new stack kind of slowly more and more integrating with Rails land. We call it jQuery land or Rails land, depending on where we are in the code. Pens, oh, this is the CodePen team. I made this pen for us, and it's just kind of fun. We're cute. And the pen editor, unfortunately, that is a big bundle of a lot of different code bases. And the header and the footer are in the new stack, but the actual pen editor itself is still in Rails and jQuery land. And it does pull from more modern technologies, like our processors are built with Node and everything, but unfortunately, the actual editor itself is still using these old technologies, and we're very slowly moving certain things out, but it's definitely a process. And what's interesting about this one is the header is one that we wanted to unify across pens and also projects, and so this is a projects editor. So it's using the new stack in the header as well, but that is Redux land. And so that entire projects editor is just a big, I don't want to say mess, because it was good Redux, but amongst the rest of the stack, it's definitely a big knitted mess. And so all that being said, it's not all bad. It's great. We've still learned a ton by using all these different technologies. Redux was a really good intro for the team into React and how to do proper state management across everything. It also taught us what we don't want to do. Because the way it was structured, the Redux components, if you want to edit one, you have to go across all the different files of the actions and the reducers and the UI itself, and then integrating it to the Rails side. And it's such a mess of files that it's not as modular as we wanted it to be. And so what's great about that is Apollo and GraphQL is really, really fun to write. And we've been really excited to be able to move into this new land of Apollo and GraphQL because it's so modular, and we're able to kind of use the best of a lot of different technologies with this new stack. There are some features that are completely shipped with the new stack. I already talked about CodePen topics. The responsive pen editor, that one was my baby. I was so excited to launch that one. Originally, it was an entirely separate application when you logged onto the CodePen editor with your phone. And it was just a completely different site shipped in Rails and jQuery land, and it was gross. And so the new stack, it still definitely uses Rails and jQuery land, but we're able to rip out thousands and thousands of lines of code by completely getting rid of that and adding in that header and footer and everything using the new stack. And then all of the pop-ups and modals and drawers, anytime you add something to a collection, all of those across the site use the new stack as well. And what's fun about that, which I'll get into it soon, is that lets us use both the local Apollo state and the server side. And so I'll get into that with the Apollo and GraphQL setup. So we have a server state and a local client state. And the server state includes things like the current logged in user and all of the details about them, whether or not they have a pro account or if they're not logged in. And then the client state lets us find things like, for example, if a drawer is open or not, and different just actual UI elements that don't need to affect the server at all. And what's cool about Apollo is it doesn't care where the state comes from. It can just query it, and you don't have to worry about is it coming from the local state or the server state or anything. You just get that information and you can use it. And we can make things particularly modular with functional components and hooks. We've been moving everything to a much more functional state of things and integrating hooks with Apollo, and it's been really exciting. What's a functional programmer's favorite animal? A lamb, duh. So we've been very excited about being able to move to a more functional landscape. So that being said, I wanted to show some code samples of what a query might look like for those of you who haven't seen an Apollo and GraphQL query before. So let's just say I wanted to get the session user. It would be as simple as just creating a query and getting the session user via the ID and checking if they're a non or not. You don't have to add this anon thing. And let's just say I wanted to find out also if this user is pro. All I have to do is add pro, and then it's just done. And it's really nice, and you can add so many different elements depending on what's in the backend API that your team sets up for that. And it lets the front end really have the power of shaping exactly what it needs for a particular component, and it doesn't have to rely on other components in the system at all. It's just completely modular, it's just completely like in its own unit, and it's great. I do think that Apollo has a long way to come with error handling. One thing that we ran into a lot is just errors that didn't make sense. For example, we learned the hard way that if you don't include an ID, the query just won't work. And we didn't know why, it just didn't. And it'll sometimes throw very random, like, variable is undefined, but wouldn't tell us where. And so there's definitely like some little kinks to work out with it, but it's definitely come a long way, and I think the Apollo team just raised a round of funding, so it'll be exciting to see where the framework goes. But anyway, let's just say I want to use this session user query. We can do something as simple as this, and I'll break it down because it's a lot of code. This is an actual segment of code that I took out of our code base to show you, and it's in the sidebar. If you are a pro user, we won't show any link about going pro. If you're a logged in user, we'll let you click it and it'll show a pop-up like, hey, here's what you can do to buy an account. And then if you're anonymous, it won't show a pop-up or anything. It'll just take you to a page to create an account and potentially set one up. And so that session user query on the previous slide, that first line, it just uses the query. And that comes from a hooks library. It just gets the data and then pushes it into a session user object. And it's as simple as that. If I were to add more elements, it would just add it into that object. And so I can use that as simply as saying if session user.pro, then we don't need to return the link, and that's it. And then otherwise, we can use it. We have the session user.anon there, and then we're able to, set up our UI using these variables, which is really exciting. It really gives a lot of power to the front end without having to worry about what the back end is doing. Our testing setup is interesting because we have both unit testing and integration testing. And for unit testing, we usually use Jest for pretty much everything, and then Cypress for integration testing. And for unit testing, we don't unit test our actual components very much, and that's just what we've done so far. Some people feel very strongly about unit testing individual components, but we mostly test our utils, and so we have a util, for example, that capitalizes strings properly, and so we have a very basic unit test that checks if this is all lowercase and you capitalize it, it capitalizes the first letter. It's a relatively simple util, but that's generally how simple our unit tests are for all of our utils. But in terms of Cypress for our integration tests, what's really interesting about it is it really kind of pulls from our jQuery roots as a company, and it kind of acts like a state machine. It's very jQuery-like, where if you're testing how to render the page, this is one of the really short tests that we have. It lets you visit the page, get a certain element that you want, and then test attributes of that element. And you can go so far as saying, okay, I want you to visit this page, click these things, change this about your profile, go back to the page, and just navigate around, and it just does it for you. And so it's like a user is navigating your site, but it's Cypress. And it's been proven to be really great for us. We've been really excited about Cypress. The issues that we've run into with this is that we've had to really improve the speed of our local environments because the tests run so fast. Sometimes they're just like, oh, the sidebar didn't render, sorry, but that's just because it didn't load fast enough. And so one of the things that we've been improving a lot on our end of things is just improving efficiency of our code and speed of both our local environment, but just in general, so that way Cypress passes more often, but also it's just better for our users if certain things are written more efficiently. So, what's next? We have a few things that we're working on quickly and a few things that we're working on slowly. And so the things that we're slowly working on are things that don't impact users as much, but it's things that are really important for the site to just be more maintainable over time. And so slowly, the first thing that we really need to work on is routing. So when you have a big hodgepodge of technologies, chances are these technologies use routers. And my goodness, React router and the jQuery and Rails router are very different. And so we've had to definitely make some compensations for the two different routers. And so, for example, the Rails router controls most of the site. That's just how you navigate in between it. And it might be a while before we actually become a full single-page application. That being said, in the pen editor, we render a different header in the pen depending on what mode you're in. So for example, if you're pro, you can have professor mode where you can have students log on and watch you code. You can have collab mode where you're pair programming with someone. There's live mode, there's full screen mode. There's all these different modes. They all use the same header component. And so we have to use React router to get the data from the Rails router to figure out what path we're on, parse the actual path, and then pass that into the React router, and then use the data from that to actually render the component and the different aspects of the component for each of the types of pen headers. And that's just pens. We also have it for projects and other things. And so routing is a problem that we're slowly working on. And it's one of those things where I think as we add more features over time, it's just something that the React side will take over more and more, but right now it's just a compensating mechanism as more and more of the site is moved over. Moving projects and the dashboard to Apollo land, that's gonna take a bit. It's better than jQuery, and so we're kind of just like, okay, it works, it's fine. But there was a quote that one of my coworkers talked about recently where he was saying that when you're building an application, it's kind of like you're knitting a castle together. And it's this beautiful little thing that you end up knitting. But the thing is, you don't necessarily want a knit castle, you want a Lego castle. Because with Legos, you can take one brick apart, you can add one in there, you can put it back, it's all very modular, you have these nice little bricks. If you have a knit castle, you have to like cut something open, you have to unthread something, you have to untie certain things, you have to just kind of tack it on and tie it up. There's a lot of mess there, and unfortunately with the Redux side of our code, we have to deal with that, and that's something that we're definitely trying to slowly work on. You saw on the dashboard we have a couple buttons here and there that are using the new stuff, but it's definitely something where over time we're slowly going to rip Redux out, but because there's so many different files that every single component touches, it's kind of messy, and so that's something we're slowly working on, and it's something that luckily they work and they're fine and we can generally maintain it, so it's not the fastest thing we're working on. And then I already mentioned this before, but speeding up our local testing environment, that's something that it'll improve our testing in general, but speeding it up locally will also improve it on prod, and luckily we've made a lot of changes that users might not have noticed. You might not notice that the site is like 6 times faster, but it is. And so we're working on it. Very fun fact. So last year, CodePen started dropping support for older browsers, and I've worked on some some processors, for example, the Babel processor in JavaScript, and we were debating, should we compile the code all the way back to ES 2015, or should we just use a more modern level? And so we decided to do just a big analysis of our users' browsers, and of the millions and millions of pens, can you guess how many people, just in the past few months, how many people actually used IE 10 or lower? You can call out a number. It wasn't 0. 12. It's right. 12 people of millions. Good job. You did it. I don't have a prize for you, but good job. Anyway, yeah, so 12 people of millions used IE 10 or below. So anyway, as a result, we didn't have to deal with supporting a lot of that old code anymore, and so that sped a lot of things up. And so we've been able to delete a lot of things just as a result of being able to make these changes and adjustments. And we're trying to actively delete as much as we add code into the code base, and it's working pretty well. In terms of things that we're quickly working on, we are working on exporting features. One thing that like 3 users noticed, but the exporting features actually changed in CodePen like a week ago, and they didn't change much. You can still export a pen to a zip file or into a gist and everything, but we're working on a new service that's extensible, so that way you can actually export to more things, secret things, and so that's something that we're working on now as a team, and just having more features for users to use their code. A more social experience. We've found that a lot of our users are saying, you know, even though CodePen isn't a social media venue, I'm kind of using it as one, and people have commented on people's code and shared their code with different people, and it's been really fun seeing people get to know others through code at CodePen, and so we want to enhance that and make it just a more fun place where you can not only code, but you can get to know other people who code similar things and get suggestions on what to learn and that sort of thing. And also just very fun secrets. There's a few features that I'm really excited about that we're working on now, and again, we're a small team, so they're quickly being worked on, but also as fast as 8 people can work on them. But more features we're hoping to just come out at a pretty regular cadence, and so we're doing that alongside all of these other improvements, and it's been really fun to work on. So how you can help, because you matter, it'd be great for you to just keep on coding and using CodePen. Recommend topics for knowledge sharing. If there's a topic that you're interested in on the topics page, you can just email us and let us know. And we, for example, added splitting JS. There were a contingent of people who wanted to use that, and now we've got a ton of pens just for splitting JS, and add whatever topics you want. Any feature requests that you're interested in, send it to us, and we'll prioritize based on that. We read every single email and every single tweet that comes in person, and so we're excited to hear more from you. And then, of course, gotta plug, get CodePen Pro. But anyway, thank you so much.